Shining star.
It says this is the list of the MPs who voted for and against the amendment, Bill number 3, in Zimbabwe's parliament today. And it states, without opposition MPs, ZANU-PF would not have secured the 2/3 majority required to pass CAB3 through the National Assembly. So, of course, the first question we're going to ask of our first panelist, who is Professor Madhuku, would be really to bring us up to speed if this is really what happened in Parliament. I'm just getting the news now, and to give us a whole. Maybe we could go straight away to Professor Madhuku to give us an update. Where do we stand with regard to the constitutional court, the legal proceedings so far, and indeed, if true, has this CAB3 been passed by Parliament? Professor Madhuku.
Yes, thank you, Professor Mandaza. I welcome today's session because it comes at a time when we really have to again meet to exchange views on where we are. So I should start from that item we have received from Hopewell, which is a useful one. It is true that in the National Assembly, they have just completed the vote. And from what we are told, 216 members of Parliament voted in favor of the bill at the third reading, and then 42 voted against. In terms of the law, you require 2/3 a majority. Under the current setup, where there are 280 members of the National Assembly, a 2/3 majority would require 187 members of Parliament. Now, with 216 members, they've gone through the 2/3. But what we are told, it would appear that about 35 members of the CCC voted with the ZANU-PF members to get to that 216, which means that as of today, they would ZANU-PF MPs were less than 187 in the National Assembly. That's what it means. So to get over 187, to get to 187, they required the votes of the opposition CCC for that purpose. In other words, there's up to about 22 MPs from ZANU-PF or wherever. Some of them, they didn't bother to attend Parliament because they were sure that there would be votes coming from the opposition. Those are the facts. We all know that this bill is all about ZANU-PF, and it's all about ensuring that President Mnangagwa remains in office for as long as he wants, because that is the intention of the amendment, CAB3. They start with 2 years. We don't know how far they want to go. Having reported that, I want to say that this is not something that should really be any surprise. It's not a very important development. It simply confirms what we knew. We knew that the parliamentary processes would go as planned by ZANU. In other words, ZANU-PF will get the requisite majorities in both the National Assembly and in the Senate. We also know that the president will assent to the bill. So that is not the issue. We are opposed to the bill. It doesn't matter whether it is said to have been, it is said to be receiving overwhelming support in Parliament, or is that it is endorsed by the president. The bottom line is that this bill is overwhelmingly rejected by the people of Zimbabwe. Not just in small, overwhelmingly. The overwhelming majority of our people don't want this bill. They are opposed to this bill. So what happens in Parliament is simply a confirmation of the fact that there would be, and there continues to be, a struggle that would ensue between the ordinary people and the political elite that is currently in control of state power. So that I thought I should make that point clear, that what has happened in Parliament need not surprise anyone. We were expecting that they will engage in that meaninglessness. You would have members of Parliament who are simply voting to extend their stay in Parliament. And then we still have to salute the 42 members of Parliament that have stood on the right side, and that must be commended. Now, I need to update people on what happened with the Constitutional Court. You remember that there were two cases that were argued in the Constitutional Court on 20 May. And then the Constitutional Court handed down judgments yesterday, 17 June, which was, by their standards, whenever they reserve judgment, they normally would go beyond a month. This was the first time they came back before the end of a month. And it was also showing that the court was actually reacting and responding to what was going on outside them, and which was to ensure that they deliver their judgment before the vote is taken in Parliament. I would indicate the significance of that. Now, many people would be discouraged that or disappointed that the court struck off the roll the two matters. When a matter is struck off the roll, it is not dismissed. The court will be saying this matter, at least the meaning of struck off the roll is that the matter ought not have been placed before the court in the manner in which it was placed before it. And let me very quickly explain the reasoning of the court. They didn't go into the merits of the matter. The first matter which many people were interested in is the matter relating to the war veterans who had taken the president to court, President Mnangagwa, and arguing that he ought not have chaired a cabinet meeting whose very reason was to debate and approve constitutional proposals to benefit him by extending his term contrary to the provisions of the constitution, which would say that if you amend a term limit, the incumbents will not benefit. So in presiding over cabinet and initiating that process and facilitating that, he was in breach of his obligations under Section 90 of our Constitution and also under Section 196, which says you cannot have a personal interest in matters. Now, that is what was placed before the Constitutional Court. Now, the Constitutional Court did not decide that the president did not breach his obligations. They avoided that question. They didn't determine whether or not the president acted correctly in chairing. What they decided instead was that they looked at their jurisdiction because we went straight to the Constitutional Court. So when you go straight to the Constitutional Court under the section we used, which is Section 167(2), subsection 2D, which is the section that allows a person to go straight to the Constitutional Court. That section gives the Constitutional Court a very narrow jurisdiction. It must do so where there is a constitutional obligation that it would have identified. Now, they decided in their wisdom that the obligations in our Constitution, which are in Section 90 and in Section 269, the one on conflict of interest, they were not sufficiently precise, or they were not the kind of obligations which would allow them to sit and defend. So it was more like avoiding the matter. That's why they struck it off the roll. So it was a very clever man and say, look, we don't know what it means to say that the president must respect the values of the liberation struggle, which was one of them. We also don't know what it means to say that the president must uphold the Constitution or must respect the Constitution. So those are not very clear. Because they are not very clear, we cannot exercise jurisdiction under this section. The judgment was very carefully written by Justice Patel. He kept on those of the members of the public and Zimbabweans who now go back to the judgment after this session must look through, and you find that Justice Patel was very careful to indicate that these are not obligations for the Constitutional Court under the section we used. That is what, but we of course thought that we were correct in doing so, but they have a different view and they are the ones that are supposed to decide. So what it meant is that they avoided determining whether or not it is proper for a president to preside over a cabinet. Now, they made some other remarks, I think, in passing, which were not relevant. We're saying, well, we also know it might be difficult for a president to avoid that. That was clear. But there is a passage in the judgment, which I want to draw the attention of all Zimbabweans to, where the court said, I hope I'm still on. I was, yes.
You've just come back. We'd lost you, Prof.
Yeah, I think someone was trying to phone me and disturbing. I think I'm on my. Okay, I can proceed.
No, go back. Go back to that.
Are you hearing me now?
Yeah, we're hearing you now. But go back to what you were saying earlier.
We've lost you.
You've lost me.
No, we got you now. We can hear you.
So I might need to
just start on that passage which you said you want to draw Zimbabweans' attention to.
Yes, I want to draw Zimbabweans' attention to, if people are hearing me,
yes,
to a passage, a very important statement in the judgment, which the media hasn't picked, but I think I did inform the Newsday, where Justice Patel says that morally, the president ought to have recused himself. In other words, the court says, as a matter of morality, he ought to have recused himself, but there's no legal obligation to do so. It's a very nice distinction, but which is very serious. In other words, this is an observation by the Constitutional Court. He says, assuming we accept the argument we had made that he ought to have recused himself morally. He says it's a very highly persuasive observation that the president ought to have recused himself morally, but then says, well, but he was not legally obliged to do so. Now, all people who would have followed what is known as rule of law or constitutionalism know that there is an element to it, is both political and legal. You don't do constitutionalism merely on the legality strict. You also look at the what we call political morality. So in other words, the Constitutional Court, as a matter of political morality, thinks that the president ought to have recused himself. And this is an important observation. That is what I thought I should draw the attention of people. That is in the judgment relating to the war veterans. But the effect of the judgment relating to the war veterans is that the obligations in Section 90 of the Constitution, which are very important because those are the only obligations that are clearly stipulated, would still have to be decided by a court that is not operating under Section 267 2D. This is why that matter must be placed before the High Court to still determine whether or not the president breached his obligations. In other words, this is a technical way we are looking at it. Because our Constitutional Court is telling us that there are obligations under 267 subsection 2 paragraph D, which is somewhat yes correct, but they claim that these obligations in Section 90 don't fall under that section. So they fall under the general constitutional law, which will have to be determined by the High Court, and then we go up. So that is where we stand at the moment. So there's no, although people are disappointed that they didn't say it, but they still have opened a way, which is that the war veterans who are very keen to continue with their important point, because they are saying for the future of our country and for the next so many years, we would not want a president to actually preside over the sort of amendments we have. So you can't do that. You are to say, look, I want more time, and you actually chair a meeting and you decide what should go in, and then you actually say to, and the Concord, given the political environment, it is very courageous in itself for that observation to be made that morally he ought to have recused himself, although he was not legally obliged to do so. Then the second application. So with this one, people must not be discouraged because the battle is still on. We cannot leave it like that. That's what the war veterans have said. They want it to be clear that when the Constitution says a president must respect the values of the liberation struggle, that is a justiciable obligation. It is something you can take a person to court on and say, you, president, you have not respected the values of the liberation struggle. You, president, you are failing to uphold the Constitution. Those kind of obligations are very important. And so we will not accept the Constitutional Court is saying they are not justiciable. They are not justiciable, perhaps, yes, under 267 2D. We don't have to go straight to them. We go to a court that must determine that. I think, Professor Mandaza, this is an important aspect of this development and what happened in the... We cannot sit here as Zimbabweans and say that Section 90 of our Constitution, which imposes serious obligations on a president, is a section which cannot be taken to court and to subject the president to accountability. Similarly, they also say that the section on conflict of interest is imposed not just on the president, it is imposed on other people. Because it is imposed on other people, including the president, then it cannot fall under their jurisdiction under that section. You can see that very technical thing. Because the South African courts that are relying on, they say you only go if it is the president alone who is subjected. But here, because the president is sharing that with others, this is what will take to the High Court. Then the second one, on the one we argued, the Prince Dubegos Banda, the MP, the former MP, who took Parliament to say that they ought not have published this bill because the bill is unconstitutional. They can't start public consultations on a bill that is clearly unconstitutional, and they can't continue with it, etc. Now, the Concord simply took a very simple point and said, it's not ripe. Don't come now, because what if it is going to be rejected by Parliament itself? That's what they're saying. Well, yes, it might be unconstitutional, but allow Parliament. So they say Parliament might reject it. It might be amended. The president might refuse to sign it into law. The president might take it to a referendum. The president might actually call a referendum. That's what they say. I mean, they've taken a very simple point to say, why are you coming to us now? Yes, you may be correct that is objectionable, but it's not right. Allow that process because the process itself might kill the bill. Now, on the face of it, that sounds a very attractive proposition, but when it is analyzed, it's just an avoidance. Clearly, we try to convince them that, look, There are exceptional circumstances where a court may intervene. So they say they will not intervene now. But again, Justice Patel, who wrote that judgment, was quite good in that one. I must say that. He clearly said he would not want to go into any single item of what we were arguing, because he wants to preserve when the time is ripe. That's what he says. When it is ripe, we want those arguments to be visited. And I think he's clearly also of the view, and I'm sure that's what they were discussing. They think that that bill is doing term limit is contrary to section 328, subsection 7 of the Constitution. But they have not said that. But the reason why they kept on emphasizing that it's not right is to ensure that it will be fought when it is. So the attitude that they took, they've now closed our access to the Concord before the bill has been signed into law. That is the serious impact of it. They've said, wait until it is enacted. In other words, you wait until the president has signed it into law. Then you can go to a court. Whether they are right or wrong with that, that is something we'll discuss later. But now, for now, we will have, which is why this vote that has happened today, we are also waiting that the other vote takes place in the Senate, and that they might go to then the president to sign it into law. But Justice Patel, another passage people must look out for. There are two passages in that judgment which are very, very interesting. The first one is that he actually says, what if it is taken to a referendum? The way he formulates that sentence, he's just trying to say to the president, take the bill to a referendum. That's what I can say is happening. The second suggestion he makes is that what if the president asks for our opinion on its constitutionality? So he's also saying that given the controversies surrounding this bill, wouldn't it be better before the president signs it into law for the president himself, because he's allowed by some section 131, paragraph 8 or subsection 8 of the Constitution to go to the Concord if he has reservations about the constitutionality of it. So there's still room, that is what the judgment says, for those possibilities to happen. So I think they can also be taken. As far as the clients and others who are concerned, the client, in this case, Prince Dubek Osman, he's now quite eager. He says, look, he would want to get back to the Concord as soon as the bill is passed. But obviously, there will be many people that could take that up. Now, that takes me to a point I need to make, and I'm not sure, and I don't want to be long. You would need to stop me at some point. The point I want to make to Zimbabweans is that where we are at the moment, the legal steps, the legal challenges are merely part of our strategies for all of us who are opposed to CAB3. CAB3 must be fought legally. It must be fought politically. It must be fought in other ways, which other people might, but it just must be fought. Left, right, and center, if there's such an expression. It must be fought everywhere. So when we go with a legal challenge, it's not so much about whether it has succeeded on day one, because this is merely the first step, which is a challenge that took place before the bill had been passed. And we see what the court has done. The court is an avenue that must be fully exhausted for very good reasons. One good reason is that we are a state, we are a country, we have courts, we have parliament, we have the executive. The courts must do their work. And part of the work of the court, which is very important, is to protect the rights of citizens. And this is what they are being called upon to do. So we won't stop that. And I'm not sure until we cannot do anything more, we can no longer walk or whatever, or we can no longer talk, we can no longer write, we can no longer argue, or we no longer have clients. But the Constitutional Court is going to be utilized, and the other courts are going to be utilized for the simple reason that they exist for that purpose, and they must be taken, they must be used for the purposes for which they were set up. So in this case, we want to say to Zimbabweans, you can get disappointed on day one, but this is simply day one. There will be more and more challenges legally. But that doesn't stop. Like, I think my colleagues will come in. The other steps will be taken. I've read and followed what both Senator Timba there and Tendai have been posting, and I'm following what they have been saying. They are all clear that various strategies, legal strategy, we must use it. Zimbabweans must also know that because of the madness of these people, you also want to limit the damage that people will get. I mean, some of them can just shoot unnecessarily. The very peaceful way of resolving this thing is to have a court that sticks to the language of the Constitution, which is very clear. Section 328, subsection 7, says that you cannot have a term limit provision which benefits an incumbent. That is very straightforward. And why would we not have courts that clearly give meaning to that and what the bill that has been passed by the National Assembly is completely contrary to that. So I'm saying this. I know that you get people following, but Justice Patel's judgment, which is agreed to by all the other 6 judges, now draws a distinction between the 2 provisions in Section 328. It is what it calls the procedural provisions, which are the provisions to do with procedure, and then what it calls substantive provisions. Substantive provisions include Section 328, subsection 7. So he says with substantive provisions, you have to wait and come to court. And that's what we will have to do. And we think it's a big development that they now recognize. It was a very long argument in the courts for when they wanted to restrict 328 to procedures. But now it's clear it's both procedure and substance. And you must comply with both the procedure and the substance of that 328. So I think that if people are listening now, the legal strategy is still very much available. Let's test the courts up to the end. We must, by our going there, show them that we know that they exist and they have a role to play. They must play that role. Then finally, I want to come to the issue of the role that we should play. And here I, of course, get to hear what my other colleagues are saying. We have been working on ensuring that we have one united front politically. And then the political front must include all people who are opposed to the CAB3. And we are almost now there because after Parliament has voted, like the National Assembly has voted, they are saying they are going home up to 7 July. Then when the Senate votes, they go home. The President votes, signs, he also, I think, goes home. And he will think that they've finished. Yet that is when they will now have to do their real contestation with the people. They would have finished their nonsense. And we will be telling them that that nonsense will never be part of the law of this country. I don't think there's a Zimbabwean who should lose sleep over the fact that they will not vote for. I mean, it's not going to happen that this country will no longer vote for our president. No, it's not going to happen. That you actually in 2028 continue to have people who will just be sitting in parliament without anyone electing them after the end of their 5-year period, and we will all be sitting at home doing nothing. That is not going to happen. So what these people are doing, let them finish their nonsense and then prepare for real confrontation, which will both be legal. First, we will place the courts between us and them. And as I've said, let us not give up on the courts. This has been my message throughout. Courts must do their work, and we must remind them. If you have an opportunity, I'm here addressing Zimbabweans across the world. Do read the 2 judgments, and you must then find what the judges, they are representing correctly the arguments, although they then don't do anything, but they carefully tell us what was being said about the president. He chaired a meeting, he initiated, and the applicants are saying this. You know, the arguments are put there. This is for the record, which will be there for the next 5,000 years. Because these are things that are there, that once upon a time, there was a president who sat in his office and said he wanted more time. He called invited his colleagues, whom we called the cabinet. And then they sat there and decided that they will get this and go to parliament. They were taken to court. These arguments were made somewhere through a technicality. The court did not put that president. I mean, those are things that will be, it can be very inspiring to read those summaries. When you read the summary about Prince Jubegos Banda, the court also faithfully captures the argument where Prince says, look, for parliament, don't debate this bill. It's unconstitutional on the face of it. Don't even go into it. Refuse to publish it. Refuse to carry on with the business of parliament. Then you are saying it's not ripe. Now, these things are now on record. Our young people will read them. Future generations will read them. They will know what to avoid. They will know what ought not to be done. They will also now read our next phase of the struggle. How far this generation will try and stop these things. So we are as committed. CAB3 is not going to survive. That's my belief. Zimbabweans in their millions are against it. The people who are pushing it know it. And I think that people must, if you want something to look at past time, just go through the videos where the minister in parliament, he looks very exhausted and confused. Even wherever you can see this is a person who is now knowing that what he's doing is not correct. I actually watched him after the vote when he was being interviewed on ZBC. I was just watching him. He couldn't even, he of course spoke as if he was announcing victory. But if you look at his body language, he's so worn out, completely. He's not putting across the picture of a person who is doing that which is good for us. So that sense of now unsureness and so on, sense of I'm not sure whether they have any sense of guilt. They might be beginning. These people are now exhausted. They are very easy to defeat. Those will be my interventions and my contributions. So the way forward is that two-pronged. The legal processes will continue and so forth. Then we must prepare ourselves for the politics of it, which can be deployed at any stage peacefully, but we can never give up on this.
Well, thank you very much, Tezara, for educating us and educating Zimbabweans across the globe, as you said correctly. We have a lot of people watching this and listening very closely. I feel more educated about this process than I was before. But just two questions before I leave you to rest after a wonderful exposition. The first is, in the court of public opinion,
I'm not hearing you, I think.
You're not hearing me? You can't hear me? Hello?
I can hear you, Prof. I can hear you, Prof. Mandaza. I can hear you.
I can also hear you, Tendai, but I'm not hearing Professor Mandaza.
Professor Mandaza, he can hear me, but he can't hear you. So it's your gadgets.
It's Professor Madhuku's gadget. Anyway, I'll raise the question before I, while the technicians are looking at it. I take it that the Tendai and Jameson can hear me. My question to Professor Madhuku was twofold. The first was that in the court of public opinion, the judiciary is held in very low esteem in this country. Do you think the Constitutional Court has redeemed itself so far? Because as you said, although it was very tentative in the manner in which they ruled, there is still room, and more than a room, even suggestions that the Constitutional Court is going along with the applicants in terms, first and foremost, in terms of the conflict of interest, and indeed the extent to which the president is out to benefit personally in a process in which he himself.
I don't think he heard you.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So I'll leave that. I hope he hears me later. But Tendai, maybe you can handle that later. Now let me turn to Jameson Timba to provide us inter alia an overview and update. Some of which update is now before us. I didn't know that there would be a vote so soon. So it's to you, Senator Jameson Timba. Give us the permutations, political permutations that went on today in the House of Assembly. What does this mean? What does it mean in terms of the conduct of these people? What Lavo Madhuku called nonsense. How do you explain this nonsense?
For me, can you hear me, Prof?
Yes, I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, thank you very much. I think for me, the starting point is that the Parliament of Zimbabwe, as it is currently constituted, is illegitimate. Representation in that Parliament was interfered with by ZANU-PF through its functionaries, through the Speaker of Parliament, in connivance with ZEC and the judiciary, to reconfigure the representation in that Parliament. There was no two-thirds majority at the end of the elections in August 2023. No political party, it's two-thirds. Therefore, there was no party which was in a position legally and legitimately to amend the Constitution in the form and manner in which they have done now. Having said that, I would like to express, call it, I don't know, sometimes it is an annoyance, Prof, when yes. Members of Parliament which were created by ZANU-PF are referred to as opposition. They are not opposition. All the MPs created as a result of unlawful recalls which were done by ZANU-PF are not opposition. It is therefore factually incorrect to say that members of the opposition today assisted ZANU-PF to amend the Constitution. That's not a factual position. The factual position is the ZANU-PF and its created political party, which they own, they have amended the Constitution of the Republic of Zimbabwe. Sitting on the numbers themselves, Prof, ZANU-PF had 182, okay? Voting in present, in Parliament. Okay, so for them to get the so-called two-thirds, they needed 5 additional votes, which they secured from the political party that they created, which is called Sengezo Shabangu, which is also masquerading and or abusing the name of the legitimate CCC, which participated in the elections of August 2023. Because all the MPs that have been used to achieve this were not elected by anyone. They were appointed by Chabangu with the approval of the Secretary General of ZANU-PF, who happens to be the Speaker of the House of Assembly. That's how they've amended this constitution. We deem this amendment and this process totally illegitimate and totally unacceptable for any right-thinking person in Zimbabwe or even internationally. This is a circus which should not be entertained in any name of democracy. Also, going back to numbers, there is also some form of distortion. I'm sincerely hoping that tomorrow we'll be able to give you the correct numbers. Okay, the way in which a constitutional bill is voted for, there's no such thing as a no vote, so to speak. What they seek to achieve is an affirmative vote of 2/3, which is the 187. Okay, so those who choose, for instance, to abstain are deemed to have voted no. Okay, and there's a good number of MPs who actually did not participate in that voting in Parliament today, and hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to give you fuller details so that there's a proper record for posterity. In addition, Prof, let me say to you that whilst we identified Parliament as one of the theaters of the struggle to fight this CAB3, we are under no illusion that Parliament itself would deliver a result against CAB3. But we intended to use Parliament and our parliamentarians to demonstrate to Zimbabweans and to the whole world what a circus this republic and this government has become, by outlining all the nonsense that our MPs have been able to outline in Parliament. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate the members of Parliament who stood up and debated against CAB3, and bravely so. They were intimidated, they were heckled, they stayed up to after midnight, still made the point for and on behalf of the CAB3 is absolute nonsense. The fight will be taken to the Senate now. And within the Senate, as things stand now, the ZANU-PF is also short of 3 votes. Okay, this is working on the assumption that all their senators, that is 33 of them, would vote with them, and 18 of the chiefs would vote with them, and 2 of the representatives of our compatriots with disabilities would also vote with them. That would leave them short of 3 votes, which their political party, which they created, will again provide those votes to them and make sure that they get the necessary 2/3. And if they do, I think you should be expecting a Senate vote of probably their number plus an additional maybe 19 that would come from the political party that they manufactured for purposes of what we are having now. So there will be senators who will stand up against this bill for posterity, oppose CAB3, and put it on record and in Hansard that this is what happened to this country in 2026 when a regime intended to reproduce itself and reproduce power extra legally, as we are witnessing. But this fight is not over, and I want to agree with Professor Madhuku, and particularly his observations that he made from the Patel judgment vis-a-vis the Prince Sibanda application. It's a very interesting judgment. I think every Zimbabwean, it's available, should go through it. And the remarks which are made therein by Justice Patel. It is also my observation, as Prof. Madhuku has rightly observed, that the court is actually offering the president an off-ramp out of this problem that we're facing as a country. The court could have simply just stopped it, saying that this matter is not yet ripe. But they went further to emphasize that there are options. Okay, and those options are is provided for in section 131 of the Constitution. That the president can still come to them and ask for an opinion, but he can also return the bill itself to Parliament, etc., etc. And the referendum can be asked for. The danger that is there now, Prof. Madhuku,
Yes.
and Prof. Ibo, is that there is a real possibility and a real possible scenario that if that option is exercised, of that off-ramp, okay, that maybe the current president might actually not be the beneficiary because of time constraints. If a referendum were to be ordered, do we still have sufficient time to be able to do that before the so-called third term or whatever? I don't know, Prof. I leave that challenge with you, Professor Madhuku, to say what are the chances that the current president might actually not be the beneficiary of CAB3 because of time challenges that might arise if certain processes are followed. We never, at any one time, thought that the court, at the end of the day, would provide the solution. It would be a bonus if it does. But the people of Zimbabwe must be clear in their minds, very clear in their minds, that this constitution belongs to them. And ultimately, the people of Zimbabwe are the last line of defense for this constitution. And people of Zimbabwe need to be able to know that they cannot outsource their future and its defense to anybody else. We are our own liberators at the end of the day. We have Section 59 of the Constitution of the Republic, which allows us to express ourselves as a people, to express our displeasure lawfully with the current abuse that people of Zimbabwe are being taken through CAB3. And this is something that we are basically saying, Prof. Ibo, is that we are going there. We will have to ask people of Zimbabwe to exercise their rights in terms of Section 59. And there's also Prof. Madhuku said, yes, we will come back. We're coming back to court. If they say we wait until the law is passed, yes, once that is passed, we will be back in court. Because what the court has done is to defer this challenge rather than to dismiss it. So people should not despair over that. But in addition to that, those who are celebrating, I would want to encourage them at this juncture to not to go around as many victory laps as their legs permit, but to wait, to wait until this matter is over. As I indicated before, it ain't over, and we are committed to fighting CAB3 to the bitter end. Let me end here, Prof. Then I'll be able to respond to any questions that you might have.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Jameson, your point about the nature and content of the parliament as an illegal assembly. Would you then consider that the whole process through which parliament was involved was purely farcical?
It is farcical and illegitimate, as far as I'm concerned. You cannot go and manufacture a two-thirds. Then you come and say, we now have been allowed by people of Zimbabwe to alter the democratic architecture of the country. And you do that with a straight face. There should be some level of shame in governance and in statecraft. And it doesn't seem to exist with these guys. You simply cannot do what they're doing. The Speaker of Parliament, he sits in that chair. He knows that he does not have two-thirds majority. The president knows that he doesn't have two-thirds majority. They both know that what is being done is not lawful. So yes, it is farcical and it is illegitimate.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. Let's move now to Tendai Biti. Tendai, if you can begin by answering the question which I put to Professor Madhuku, which I hope that he's able to listen to now, but also an exposure of the underlying political architecture and motivations behind CAB3, including the role of the Ziganandas. We have seen a shameful spectacle in the last few weeks, where MPs are being bought openly to the extent that it tended to betray the ambitions of these Ziganandas, to the point where some people are saying that this CAB3 is less about Emerson Mnangagwa than about those who think they can fill in should something happen to him. including the inadvertent leak that the health of the head of state is quite precarious. So, Tendai, please help us.
Well, thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Very well indeed.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I've had to switch off my video because of internet challenges. So I hope you bear with me. I think today is a critical juncture in our country's history because it confirms the juridical process of the slow coup that CAB3 is ushering. It also confirms the fact that the elites who are controlling and driving the agenda of CAB3 are not prepared to listen, are not prepared to alter or modify their methods and processes, did not learn anything from 2017, are not able to gauge the mood and anger in the public, are not able to gauge the extent of the rupture and division in the state. More importantly, are not able to understand the body language of certain important constituencies in the state, including the judiciary itself, including the military. So you have a complete bunch of individuals, a coterie of gangsters that are hell-bent on destroying this country, oblivious to public sentiment, oblivious to the constitutional good that is captured in our constitution, oblivious to history, oblivious to public sentiment, oblivious to objectivity. We always knew, and what has happened today shouldn't surprise anyone. We always knew that they were going to pass CAB3, but we always knew that the options before them were limited. They would either pass CAB3 and sign it and try to implement it without a referendum, or they would try to pass CAB3 but with one referendum and not the two referendums that are in section 328(7) and 328(9). The most unlikely scenario was always that perhaps logic at some stage would prevail and they would withdraw CAB3, or alternatively, they will find a soft landing of withdrawing a CAB3, but with the skin on their face. And I noticed that the Prince Tobacco judgment offers them some alternative routes, including a direct constitutional application by the president to seek an opinion on CAB3. But I think that the process is irreversible. They are on a slippery slope. Just like 2017, they are no longer capable of extricating themselves from the mess that they've created. They're no longer capable of recovering themselves from the sewer that they are plunging towards, which sewer will ultimately drown them and regrettably drown Zimbabwe as well. And I think this is the biggest tragedy that we face. So, what do we do now from today? I want to answer that to answer this question, we must understand what is the motive and what are the drivers of CAB3. CAB3 has absolutely nothing to do with ZANU-PF. There is not a single provision in CAB3 that benefits ZANU-PF, the entity, the political entity, the political sobriquet that is known as ZANU-PF. There's not a single provision in CAB3 that benefits ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF went to war, led a war founded on the principle of one man, one vote. More than 50,000 people died between 1963 and 1979 in the bush during the War of Liberation. And at the epicenter, the center of gravity of the War of Liberation was one man, one vote. So ZANU as an institution can't eat its own children, can't reverse what it fought for. And I'm glad that in the War Veterans Act case, the Ruben Zulu case, one of the issues that was at stake was that the president had breached his constitutional obligation of upholding the values of the liberation struggle because one of the epicenters, one of the governments of the struggle for liberation was the concept of one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. So CAB3 is inimical to the liberation struggle and therefore inimical to a genuine liberation movement if ZANU-PF still existed at all. ZANU-PF doesn't benefit at all from 10 extensions. After all, ZANU-PF itself goes to an elective congress every 5 years. Neither Emerson Mnangagwa nor Robert Mugabe had a blank check in ZANU-PF. They go to regular congresses, elective congresses, after every 5 years. And this has been happening since the Boredo Congress of 1985. So this has been happening. It has been 1984 in Boredo. You were there. I was in primary school. So don't remind me.
The thing is,
basically saying that you are old.
So they've been having these elective congresses since 1984. You said 84. I always thought it was 85, but I know that it was at Boredo Race Cross, and Thomas Mafumo played the song Congress at that function. So extending the term of parliament to 7 years can't be ZANU-PF. It's inconsistent with ZANU-PF and ZANU-PF's own practice. Politicizing traditional leaders is not ZANU-PF. Removing the gender commission is not ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF has got a strong women's league, and consistently ZANU-PF has always had a strong women's league over the years. So there's nothing in that ZANU-PF has always, contrary to our views, believed that the gun is superior to civilian politics, and that has been one of our biggest fights over them. But to that extent, ZANU-PF pushed the Section 212 during the constitutional making negotiations. We resisted it, but ZANU-PF insisted on Section 212, and quid pro quo, we then got Section 210, which is the oversight commission that oversees the army. So there's nothing in CAB3 that benefits ZANU-PF at all. That benefits ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF presidents have been going to elections, and by hook and crook, they've been declared presidents. So they can't suddenly think that there's anything that will benefit them by pushing the electoral constituency, the electoral college, from 17 million people to 280 people. So who is driving this? The answer is very simple. There's been a conflation of aggrandizement, of accumulation with political desire. And in Zimbabwe, like in any patronage state, patronage and state capture and control of the state palaces reinforces looting, reinforces accumulation. And what we have in Zimbabwe, we've failed over 48 years of independence. We've hardly created any independent black capital that can exist outside the state. So there are a few individuals. I could mention Shingim Tasa, is one of them, and his business empire. But by and large, we failed to create independent black capital that can exist outside the state. We have produced individuals, wealthy individuals, that have depended on the state for rent, that have depended on the state for arbitrage. Whether it's the late Roger Boka, whether it's the late Solomon Paweni, whether I can't mention some of the individuals because they are late. I was going to mention Mutuma Mawere, but I can't do that. So now we have this new breed of parasitic capital, this new breed of looters that have made billions of dollars from command agriculture. I chaired the Public Accounts Committee, and we exposed that over $3 billion was looted from command agriculture, principally by Kuda, Tagire, and Secunda holdings. I was fired before I could write that docket, that report before Parliament, and another chairperson took over. But I can assure you that the evidence we gathered is sufficient to constitute an executable docket against the individuals that were named there. We proved that over $3 billion went to private hands but we did not prove, and we could not find, and no one could prove the consideration, i.e. the money, that sorry, the services or goods or inputs that were supplied in return. So that's command agriculture. What about the treasury bills? Over $12 billion worth of treasury bills had been issued by 2019. The bulk of those went to these particular individuals. I keep on making reference to the infamous treasury bill of 19 January 2019, when $360 million was given to Kudata Gwire. 20 February 2019, SI 33 of 2019 was gazetted. All treasury bills were converted to local currency, but Aguirre's bill of treasury bills, US $360 million, was not converted into local currency. So treasury bills has been a source and a commanding height of looting. What about gold and our commodities? Only last year, Scott Sakupanya's Beta Brands delivered 30.9 tons of the 47 tons that the country produced and delivered. The total import received from gold last year was $4.1 billion, meaning that Scott on his own got at least $2.5 billion from gold. What about contracts, road contracts? The Trababalas interchange cost over 300 million. The Harare Bay Bridge Road is costing around the equivalent of around $3 million a kilometer, when the normal cost of a 1 kilometer of dual carriageway is $1 million. The Bay Bridge rehabilitation cost over $200 million, when it ought to have cost $40 million. I could go on and on and on. So this thing, CAB3, is about the conflation of greed and power. They've been so proximate to the president. They've been going to the State House every day to see the president. They now suddenly think that they can occupy the seats that the president is occupying themselves, which is foolish. There's a Nigerian phrase that says that if you're eating, don't open your mouth. These guys have opened their mouth, and we've seen what they are made of. A very ugly sight, if you ask me. They're dishing vehicles left, right, and center. They're dishing money left, right, and center in a country where 79% of the people live below the poverty datum line. In a country where in some districts, like Gokwe district, 80% of school-going children are dropping out for various reasons, including the fact that their parents can't pay school fees. In a country where, in places like Epworth, 14-year-olds and 9-year-olds are waiting in the streets, prostituting themselves because their parents can't afford to put food on the table. So we are owned by Jigananda. They own this project. Millions and millions of dollars have been paid to subvert the process of parliament, right from the public consultations, which were a pure sham. We saw, what happened to today's process, where a process secret and by secret ballots, and there's a Supreme Court judgment to this effect. The matter of Love Momoyo versus Parliament, where the late Chichosiku, as Chief Justice, may he so rest in peace, wrote a judgment about the importance of a secret ballot in Parliament. So I now answer the question: where to from here? I think naturally, once the president has put his signature to this process, you will see massive litigation. I think there's going to be litigation from all angles, and I urge any citizen who feels like going to court to go to court. I know that the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights and other organizations are ready for that. I think people should go to court for 3 reasons. Number one, it's for posterity. These judgments, whether we win or lose, record these atrocities. So history will open to account. Professor Madhuku was very correct in saying that the 2 judgments that were handed down yesterday, the Ruben Zulu judgment, the War Veterans judgment. Am I breaking?
No, okay.
We are hearing it's okay.
Okay, thank you. So the 2 judgments were very deliberative, in the form of almost being like the batting minute. What happened? Who said what? What was the response? I think they were doing it very deliberate. They normally don't write judgments like that. I think they knew that these judgments were recording an important part of our history, and recording history is important. I think that the names of MPs who voted in support of this bill from both sides must be publicized and history must record them. Anyone who said yes to CAB3, history must record them. It's important that history holds people to account. So we go to court for posterity. We go to court as well because courts offer a soft landing. Courts are arbitrators of serious disputes. So courts offer a soft landing in that sometimes you then avoid bloodshed. And we're dealing with crazy people with an insatiable lust for blood, with an insatiable craving for people's blood. So we go to court in order to save lives and in order to mitigate the potential of an explosion. But in this case, we're going to court because there is no way out for the court. There is no way that a court can panel beat the ordinary grammatical meaning of Section 328. It doesn't matter how many sangomas one can go to. It doesn't matter how many marabouts one can go to. You cannot panel beat the clear black and white provision of Section 328. So I'm not a prophet, nor am I a marabout. And I've been bringing cases before courts where I don't understand why I've lost. I felt it's politics and so forth. But on this one, I'm prepared to stick my neck out and say there is no way out for any self-respecting judiciary, and I want to believe that there are decent men and women in that constitutional court. There is no way out. There is no amount of ngangarism that can panel beat the meaning, the black and white meaning of Section 328, in particular subsection 7, in particular subsection 9, these referendums. So we have no choice but to go to the court. But court should be part of the struggles. I think that you will see the coalition that the three of us have been trying to build, and I think that at the appropriate time, announcement will be made in respect of those that will be leading it, or the clergy that will be leading the same. I also think that you will see people expressing themselves because Section 59 allows them to do that. But I think the sad thing is that, and I mean to ask ZANU-PF, so what now? Because they've now entrenched illegality. They've now entrenched illegitimacy. They've now made permanently the fact that there's a fight between citizens and them, because 99% of Zimbabweans are against this. So we are back to square zero. We are back in 2000, where there was a monarchian landscape, we and them, and we were in trenches fighting the regime in various platforms. We are back in that status quo. We are back in that mode. But this mode paralyzes the creative ability of the state to move forward, because this fight is then taken in every public sphere, in every private sphere, whether it's business, whether it's farming, whether it's agriculture, whether it's courtrooms, whether it's education, and so forth. We have literally lived with that since 1980, where everything in Zimbabwe becomes contested, and it's attrition. The more worrying thing is what is the reaction of these elements inside the state that we know are unhappy with the CAB3. Some of us are predictable because we believe in constitutionalism and the rule of law. So we run around to courts. We'll give police notification that we intend to meet in Nyasura or in Chipinge. But there are those in other quarters that do not respect Section 6 of the Maintenance of Peace and Order Act and other various. And we saw this in 2017. So when I say that the country has been put on a knife edge, this is exactly what I mean. So today is not the end of the process. I think today is the beginning of a tragedy, and a tragedy which, like all tragedies, will end in tears. The question is whose tears? I hope it will not be the blood and tears of 70 million Zimbabweans, of whom 7 or 8 million are suffering in the diaspora. I'll stop here.
Thanks very much, Tendai. As usual, clear, lot of data. Now, unfortunately, we don't have Muchena. Muchena has very bad flu. You can't even hear him. And one of you or all of you can reflect on the things that Muchena was about to speak about. Anyone is going to give us a background to the position of the retired generals in particular and former liberation forces with respect to current situation in Zimbabwe, including the context and implications of the meeting with Mnangagwa on 18th and 19th of May. We feel that the position, and this is why he was to join us, was to get the position of a very important factor in Zimbabwe situation, the military. Because it's also clear, some of us, that there is a level of confluence between the retired generals and or veterans, or the large section of it, on the one hand, and the military in general. Is anyone prepared to offer some reflection on that? Before we move to the last stage of our discussion, which is really trying to frame what happens hereafter. We have heard from the lawyers among us, also from James and Timba. It's not game over yet. There's going to be a vicious legal process. But we are also worried, we're also concerned about what happens with respect to the national dialogue, which must lead us to a dispensation, transitional arrangement to the next stage before elections are held. Anybody? Tendai, you want to come in? Professor
You might
Madhuku, I
not
know you
be
don't-
Yes, I could just say one thing, and perhaps Senator Timba will come in. I want to say one thing relating to the military. I believe that it is an act of being irresponsible for the current politician, especially the president and his team, not to be listening to the retired general. Because when anyone goes through what they are saying, I mean, if you wanted to see sense, if you wanted to see conviction, if you wanted to see people who are really concerned about the direction of the country, especially the direction of CAB3, you get it from them. I wanted to think at the beginning, when they started to come out at the beginning, that they were clear, providing a clear solution, and that politicians ought to listen to these people. They could not have, I think the current government does not have the moral authority to rubbish these persons. Notwithstanding, in fact, they've gone so far as to have that provision, the amendment that is proposed in CAB3 relating to the military. And then the attempts I saw from state media trying to, all rubbish what Muchena and this group have been saying. Even some attempt by, I think, ZANU-PF, must be Machacha, who published, huge pages trying to respond to the retired generals. That's my conviction. It really is irresponsible, because what they are trying to do, and they are doing it very well, is to point to the clear security dangers that arise from the course of action that the current politicians are taking. Because the way the structure of the state, although a mistake was made with Mugabe, who overstayed, but it should only make sense that once we agreed in 2013 that we would have a 10-year limit, then that was actually a source of political stability for the country. And so these efforts to extend the president's stay in office is a very dangerous development. In actually, it's undermining the national security interests of the country. And that's what the retired generals have been pointing out. Even the efforts that they did, we have read that they had meetings. So we are still believing, and I think that they have an important player in, as we say, what is the way forward, what is going to happen. They must continue to be regarded as a very key platform for us to resolve peacefully what is happening. And that's the contribution I wanted to add.
Tendai, what is your interpretation of the reported statement coming from Mnangagwa, which said to the retired generals, whoever wins, wins, whoever loses, loses? What is the understanding of that statement?
Yeah, I think that there's an absolute handling of the interventions by retired generals, particularly of the stature of Air Vice Marshal Muchena, retired. And some of the people that we've had behind that big names that we've had are behind that names. I think there's a total mishandling of that. There's also a total mishandling, in my submission, of the relationship in the presidency. I think there's no communication there. There's no communication there. So I feel that history is repeating itself, and I feel that it's deja vu, again. And I feel that this pursuit, this unrelenting push of CAB3 is just a complete disaster for everyone. And contrary to what the president has said, there's no winner. There will absolutely be no winner. There will be dead bodies. There will be a fractured state, and it will take us decades to recover. We've seen this. We're students of history. We've seen the impact of in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Central Africa Republic. There is no peace at all. There is no winner. So this is regrettable. The only solution is dialogue. The only solution is withdrawal of CAB3.
Now, colleagues, Jameson, you want to say something on the
yes, just one point that I would like to make. What I see more is a contradiction. What the retired generals are communicating, as Tendai rightly points out, is that CAB3 can and is very likely to be a source of instability for the country. And the head of state, okay, one of his key responsibilities is to maintain the security of the state. Okay, ensure that the state is stable. And that's what the retired generals are communicating. The contradiction then comes with our other activities on the international fora. We've just been elected as a member of the Security Council. And one of the key functions of the Security Council globally is to maintain peace, security, and stability globally. But our actions here at home are not a reflection of the new stature or status that we have assumed at the Security Council. Tendai also rightly says, history repeats itself. I would say that history has got a tendency to rhyme. If you listen to what General Muchena was saying, the substance of it, okay? I say to you, as students of history, go back to the statement issued in 2017 by the then General Chiwenga, when we had a similar situation. If you look at the essence of what the two gentlemen said 10 years apart, they're saying exactly the same thing. And why we cannot learn from our history, one wonders. That's what I wanted to say.
Sure, thank you. And we have almost 1,000 people who have joined us on this discussion, and by tomorrow, easily 15,000, 20,000, as has been the case on such sessions, which have attracted so much attention across the globe. We would like to end this session with some indications to Zimbabweans out there, in the diaspora in particular, and here at home. Just a brief from each of you, beginning with Tendai, on the way forward. On the way forward, concretely, what are we likely to see in terms of moving the national dialogue process to the transitional arrangement before elections are held? Okay. Tendai, your last word on this. I know you have already indicated the coalition in the making, which is a very important development. But I think people out there want to hear from yourselves, the three of you. Tendai?
Yeah, I've already said what I wanted to say in the substance, that there's going to be a plethora of activities in the courts and politically. The coalition, I think Jameson should speak on that. Suffice to say that we all recognize that it's now long overdue, and that all